Oh, hello. What are you doing here? Do you need help with something? So you're here because you want to learn how to kite better, is that right? Alright, then I will teach you the ways to kite better. So what exactly are you struggling with when kiting? Oh, is that so? Well, not to worry. I will try my best to teach you. Are you ready? Okay then, let's start with the basics. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of looking back. Looking back is important, especially when you're going against a hunter with long-range skills, or if the hunter tries to hit when you go behind a pallet. By not looking back, you can't see what the hunter is doing, so it's important that you try practicing this. Because the reason many players go down quickly is because they don't look back. Now, the second common mistake is something that even griffins still do. And that is transitioning to very open areas, leaving good kiting areas, which would have helped them survive. It's either that or they have random kiting routes, and they often place themselves in awkward positions, which either works out somehow or gets them killed faster. And that is because they don't think too much where they need to go after exhausting one kiting area, so they end up making themselves vulnerable at times, which is why you should learn kiting routes so that you don't have to run aimlessly around the map when trying to go from one area to another. So if you're already in a good kiting area, stay within that kiting area and kite the hunter around it. Do not run away from a good kiting spot or else you will really struggle. Also, don't be too reliant on your items, okay? If you don't need them yet, don't use them or else you will make yourself vulnerable when you run out of items. Yes, I'm looking at you, priestess players who spam their portals at every opportunity. Don't just spam your items. Instead, make use of your surroundings to kite the hunter. Of course, you don't do it like this. And this goes the same with pallets. Don't spam them, especially when you're on last effort. If you waste your resources, you will go down much faster, and you may not survive after rescue. Just look at this clip where I ran through all the broken pallets because I spammed them, so I get hit. Speaking of which, do you know how hunters know you're pallet camping? And this is something that really good hunters pay attention to. Not a lot of players know it, but the more a survivor has been running, the louder their breathing gets. And that is how hunters know when a survivor is behind a pallet. Which is why you should be more cautious when pallet camping. So do you have any questions? Oh, that's a good question. Alright, I'll tell you how. Here is an example of bad item usage. This mercenary used 2 of his elbow pads for a patroller, but they still get bitten and hit, and that is just a huge waste of items. Use your item to avoid getting a hit or to create distance. But be careful not to cancel the hunter's hit recovery animation. Alright, now that we've discussed the common kiting mistakes, let's discuss the types of kiting. Now, there are 3 types of kiting, and which one you do depends on the hunter. Here are the 3 types of kiting. First, we have tight kiting, big area looping, and transitional kiting. But before we get to that, let me just say one thing. Bringing knee-jerk reflex does not necessarily mean you'll be able to kite if you do not know how to do raw kiting. And yes, even if you're a priestess. So I recommend that you practice kiting with a tide turner build. Why? Because your knee-jerk reflex is useless when you're not the one kiting. Unless you're playing a decoder, yes, you should practice kiting with tide turner. Remember, tide turner is for the team. Knee-jerk reflex is for yourself.
Now the thing about tide turner and broken windows is that tide turner is for the team, and broken windows is only for the player. Broken windows will help you out, but not your team, and you have 1 in 4 chances of kiting.
And practicing with tide turner helps you be less reliant on speed boosts and items, because you will be more cautious and strategic since you are more vulnerable without resources. Alright, so let's actually start discussing about kiting methods. Tight kiting is basically looping the hunter around in one area, and this type of kiting is effective against hunters that counter transitional kiting. This method involves some mind gaming, but we'll get to that later. This is even more effective if you can break the hunter's line of sight. Big area looping is exactly what it means. You loop an area like, say, the factory in Leo's memory or the hospital in Sacred Heart. And this method is also good against Disciple or Bloody Queen, when there is a second floor. Now, transitional kiting involves you going from one kiting area to another, and this type of kiting is effective against Dream Witch, Naiads, Soul Weaver, and other hunters that can counter tight kiting. But many survivors struggle with this because they don't know when they should transition or which kiting area to go next. So how exactly do you do transitional kiting? Okay, let me show you some clips, and I will explain to you how. You'd want to transition when the hunter is in the middle of an animation, like when they're stunned, breaking an item, a pallet, or vaulting a window. In here, Clark breaks one of my cricket balls, so I transition towards another pallet. Another example, I got hit, I transition. These kiting methods, however, will become ineffective in higher tiers. Why? Because hunters would know how to shut down kiting strategies that counter them. So what do you do? Well, here's the first thing that you need to learn. What you need to learn is mind gaming. Mind gaming is essentially playing tricks on the hunter. You make them think you're going to do the one thing they expect you to do, but you don't actually do it. And many good hunters do it, like making you think they're going one direction, only to turn back in the direction you went. Do you need an example? Okay, let me show you a clip. Mind gaming is a very important skill. You wonder how to kite a geisha that knows how to counter tight kiting. It involves lots, and I mean lots, and lots of mind gaming. Which is why you should absolutely learn how to do mind gaming. I promise you, you won't go far without learning how to play mind games with the hunter. And while mind gaming is important, there is also another thing. You won't be able to kite long if you don't know kiting routes. However, before moving on to that topic, let's talk about pallets. Did you know that there are different types of pallets? Yes. You may think all pallets are the same, but pallets can have their own uses. First one is the God pallet, which is a pallet that the hunter must break at all costs to continue chasing you, because there is no other way to close the distance. Second, we have dangerous pallets that have very short walls or obstacles around them which the hunter could easily go around. Lastly, we have speed boost pallets, which you drop to get to a kiting area when you're in a bad spot, and the hunter decides to go after you. Alright, now I'll be teaching you some kiting routes. For now, I will be teaching you the kiting routes of 3 maps. I really wish I could put them all in one video, but my phone storage cannot handle it. If you want to see part 2 of this video, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so let's first talk about this kiting area. And this is not exactly the best kiting area on the map. You do not want to get found here first, especially if you have a tide turner build, okay? And here's the reason why. The areas around this kiting area are all very open. See this? There are no nearby pallets, just open space. The hunter is going to get a hit on you before you're even able to get to one. I repeat, you do not want to get found here first. And this one here too, very open area. If you try to transition away from this kiting area to a new one, you are most certainly going to get hit. But if you do insist on decoding this cipher, here's what you can do. So I dropped these pallets. If the hunter comes from graveyard side, vault this pallet right here, and you can use your speed boost to get to the church. And when you get to church, head to the nearest window. And you can use your second speed boost to get to graveyard. But if the hunter comes from this side, you vault this pallet to use your pallet speed boost to get to graveyard again. This route is not going to work if you have a tide turner build, so absolutely do not decode the cipher at the wedding site unless you have knee-jerk reflex or some item that can help you transition. Now, this cipher here is kind of bad. Many hunters will be checking this area first if they spawn near here. You don't want to decode this cipher first if you're playing a weak character. The right side of this cipher is very open, and there are no pallets. You only have this one pallet right here. Let's say the hunter does come here, and you dropped this pallet. You can try to mind game the hunter to break this pallet, and you can transition away. Now, if the hunter is on the other side of this pallet and breaks it, don't go to that area. Go to this pallet. But do know that if you're going against a naiads or a geisha, you're kind of screwed. So I recommend you don't decode that cipher. Okay, now, for this area, let's pretend there's a cipher here. Usually, there is one here. I would not recommend a decoder to take the cipher located here, but if you do take this cipher, be on the lookout for where the hunter is coming from, okay? So pretend we're decoding a cipher machine, here. Okay, we're decoding. If the hunter comes from wedding side, then go to this area. You can try to loop here, but if the hunter is too close, you can just drop the pallet. If the hunter comes from broken walls small house side, go to either one of these areas, depending on the distance, and loop the hunter around these walls. As for this cipher, well, the downside to decoding this cipher is that you have limited vision of where the hunter could be coming from. But on the bright side, you're next to one of the great kiting spots on the map. Alright, so let me tell you what you can do here. When you get a heartbeat, you can go here and wait. Look at your surroundings and watch out for the hunter's red light so that you know which direction you should be heading to. If the hunter comes from here and goes through the pallet, go around this wall. However, the direction might be different if they don't go through the pallet. Even if they come from the church, look at where the hunter is coming from and go around this wall. But if they come from small house side, go towards this pallet and you can kite in middle broken. If you don't want to have to kite, then just hide in a place that the hunter is least likely to search and hope they don't find you. Let's talk about this cipher, and the first thing I'm going to tell you is don't decode this cipher. Absolutely don't. This is 5-second kite territory. Unless you are a mercenary, a patient, a wildling, or some character with transitional kiting abilities, do not decode this cipher. But even if you were playing a strong character, I still don't recommend it. Just don't decode here unless you're down to one cipher. Alright, next is this cipher. This cipher is kind of bad, especially if you're going against hunters like Undead, Bonbon, Naiads, or any hunter that you don't want to kite around windows or small spaces. But if you do end up decoding here, you have some options. However, you should preferably be a 39 user if you want to decode here and possibly kite. Alright, so if the hunter comes from back gate side, don't vault the window next to you. Instead, use this window. You can either go to church, then to middle broken, or go straight to middle broken, depending on the situation. But if the hunter comes from broken wall side, then vault this window for a speed boost. And you can head to back gate where you can loop the hunter. Don't forget to warn your teammate if they are decoding a cipher here, in case the hunter decides they're a much better target. And here is the back gate area. Sometimes a cipher is right here. So pretend that a cipher is over here. When you get a heartbeat, go to this pallet. Wait and see where the hunter will come from, okay? You do not want to run into the hunter. So let's say the hunter came from graveyard side. You can drop this pallet, but that depends on where the hunter goes. If you do drop this pallet and the hunter doesn't break it, you can loop this area. But if the hunter breaks the pallet and they're on this side, you can vault the window and use your speed boost to get to the next kiting area. And if the hunter is on the other side, then head towards these walls with 2 pallets. Here, you can also loop the hunter. Now, this spot right here. Sometimes a cipher is right here as well. So when you decode this cipher, don't decode this side. Definitely not this side. This limits your vision. Not this side either. Decode this side so you can see where the hunter could come from. See? You have a better view of your surroundings by decoding this side of the cipher, so do take note of this. No matter which direction the hunter comes from, go towards this pallet right here. But do be careful when the hunter tries to cut you off. You can loop the hunter here for a bit, unless you're going against a bonbon or any anti-loop hunter. Okay, so let's say you loop the hunter here. When you're within hit range, you can drop this pallet here, and when the hunter either gets stunned or breaks it, you can proceed to this area. So when you get to this area, drop this pallet. If the hunter doesn't break it, loop this area until the hunter eventually breaks this pallet. Depending on which side the hunter breaks this pallet, you either go to graveyard or back gate, and you absolutely want to get to graveyard. Alright, so when you get to graveyard, go to this middle pallet right here, and wait to see where the hunter will go. And because this is a long wall, looping around this pallet isn't the best, so you can drop this pallet, depending on where the hunter is. Since this hunter bot is right here, let's just test this out. I'm going to get hit here, so I dropped this pallet. And because of the hunter's position behind the pallet, I end up taking this route. So now, we talk about this cipher. Okay, so the downside to decoding this cipher is that you have limited vision. But here's what you do. Go to this spot when you get a heartbeat and watch out for the hunter's red light. If the hunter comes from back gate side, go to this pallet. But if they come from graveyard, still go to this pallet unless they're going that direction as well. And when they do go past that pallet, go around this wall and loop the hunter around it. When the hunter is finally catching up to you, you can drop this pallet. But the thing is that you want the hunter to break this pallet on the other side, so you can go to graveyard. When the hunter does break this pallet, go to the next area. Now, this pallet, you don't have to drop this if you can get to graveyard while the hunter is breaking the first pallet. But if the hunter can hit you, if you decide not to drop this pallet, then you can drop it and make them break the pallet so you can go to graveyard. So here, we are at graveyard, and let me tell you, this is the safest cipher on this map. This cipher is best for your decoders, but the problem is this tall wall that slightly blocks your vision. Alright, so let me tell you again what you can do. Go to this spot when you hear a heartbeat, and see where the hunter will come from. If the hunter comes from here, go towards the pallet, but make sure the hunter is going the same route as you. But if the hunter comes from the front, then go behind this wall and around it, and then make your way to this pallet. You can drop this pallet to avoid a hit or create distance. And assuming the hunter is not too close, you can drop this pallet if you have knee-jerk reflex, and vault it to get to church. And here, use your window speed boost to get to middle, broken. And this is where you can continue kiting the hunter. And lastly, let's talk about this middle cipher right here. First of all, drop this pallet. If you have a 36 or 312 build, you don't need to drop it. If the hunter comes from the left side or front, vault this pallet and head towards the window for another speed boost. If you have time, you can get to back gate. But you can also run towards middle broken, since it's nearer. If the hunter comes from middle broken, then vault the window on the left, and use your speed boost to get to the graveyard. The first area we'll be talking about is shack, and this spot is a hotspot for hunters. When you decode here, most of the time, you are going to be the hunter's first target, unless you're a rescuer. What I like to do here is I drop this pallet. But Mello, I thought we weren't supposed to waste pallets. Yes, but it's your choice if you want to drop this pallet or not. I drop this pallet first so that the hunter has to break this pallet first before they're able to chase me. If I have 9, I can use the window to get to hospital or this pallet to quickly get to ruins. If the hunter was on the pallet side, then I can vault this window and head to these 2 pallets. I sometimes drop this pallet, so the hunter needs to go around before going into hospital. Now, if the hunter vaults this window, I can just vault this pallet and then head straight to ruins, which is also a really good kiting area. Second is the cipher, and I do not recommend you taking the cipher at all, especially if you are a mind's eye or a mechanic. Seriously, don't. You're going to get down quickly if you decode here. Especially if the hunter is a geisha, Wu Chang, or a Percy. I know you have 2 kiting areas right here. Say if the hunter came from there, you go here, but depending on who the hunter is, you can either make it to these 2 pallets or get hit before you do. Now, if the hunter came from hospital gate side, you can go over to here, but this area is much better for endgame. You can loop the hunter around these walls, yes, but there is no good area nearby for you to transition to. If you try to transition away from this kiting spot, you are going to get hit or downed if you are a one-shot. And this pallet here sucks. And this cipher here. Do you really need to decode here? There's nothing for you to transition to from here. You decode here, you're dead. You have this window, but it takes you nowhere. It's better to decode a different cipher than this one. This cipher isn't good, but it isn't bad either. That is, if you have knee-jerk reflex or you're a rescuer like mercenary or patient. If you do have knee-jerk reflex, you can drop this pallet right here. So if the hunter comes from there, you can transition to these pallets. You can go to hospital if you're sure you won't get hit before reaching the pallet. But if the hunter comes from the gate side, you can go to this pallet here and you can try to loop. But when you use this pallet, you must be on this side of the pallet when the hunter breaks it. So when the hunter breaks it, you can head towards this window and vault it for a speed boost to get to hospital. As for this pallet, if you won't get hit by not dropping this pallet, then don't drop it. But if you are going to get hit by not dropping it, just throw it down and go upstairs. So this spot. This used to be a really bad cipher. But with this window here, it's much better, especially if you have knee-jerk reflex. You can use this window here to get to a different area much faster. So when you decode this cipher, what do? Okay, let me show you then. When you decode this cipher, the wall behind it blocks your vision, so when you get a heartbeat, what you can do is go to this spot and watch out for the hunter. If the hunter comes from there, just head to the window. But make sure the hunter is on this side before vaulting, and use your speed boost to get to here. But if the hunter comes from the side of the window, then head straight to these pallets, and you can try looping the hunter here. Now, if you have to use this pallet, you should be on this side of the pallet when the hunter breaks it, so you can go to hospital. And if the hunter is walking towards you from this side, you can just use the window. But again, make sure the hunter is on the same side, so you aren't vaulting towards the hunter. So this spot right here sometimes has a cipher, and when you get this spawn, the hunter usually comes from hospital. But sometimes the hunter can come from this side. Alright, so when you get a heartbeat, you can stand in this spot so you can check where the hunter could come from. If the hunter comes from hospital, you can go to this pallet, unless the hunter is going in this direction as well. You can also go around this area, and you can loop the hunter here. But if the hunter comes from statue side, then you can go around this wall and proceed to loop the hunter. When you drop this pallet, you want to be on this exact same side. So when the hunter breaks the pallet, you can go there. But if you drop this pallet on this side, and the hunter breaks it, you can head to this window. This cipher is really good. You can take this cipher when you're a decoder. Now, if the hunter comes from the hospital, go to the left side and you can loop the hunter around these pallets. Just keep looping them, unless the hunter has an anti-looping kit. And when the hunter breaks one of these pallets, you can get to ruins, depending on which pallet the hunter broke. And if the hunter comes from ruin side, you can go here and loop the hunter around for a few times. But you can also take the window for a speed boost if you're going for a transitional kite. You can either loop here or go there, but you can go through here first so you can get behind a pallet if you're within hit range. So this cipher? This is a really great cipher. And you'd want to give your decoder the cipher here, because they can kite the hunter here for a really long time. If you're a rescue character or you're playing someone with really strong kiting abilities, just give this cipher to your weaker teammates like Postman or Seer. However, beginner players do not know how to make use of this area, so let me show what you can do here, when the hunter comes here. So when the hunter comes to this area, you can go to this window and wait to see where the hunter could come from. The hunter could either come from the statue area or they come from this window side. If the hunter is coming towards this window, then go to the pallet. Now, you may be wondering why you don't wait at this pallet. The reason here is that you do not want to use this pallet immediately, so you can loop this area much longer. And if the hunter comes from the side of the statue, vault the window, and you can loop the hunter around here. This cipher here is fine since you're right next to ruins, but when you get a heartbeat here, you do not want to stay beside your cipher machine, okay? If you stayed here, you could get caught off guard and even hit, since you're not behind a window or a pallet. So what do you do here? Where do you go? Okay, go to this spot right here, and you wait for the hunter. Now, if the hunter comes from the side of the pallets, you can go around this wall, and maybe even vault the window, if you won't get terror shocked. You can either loop the hunter here, or head to this pallet right here. But if the hunter comes from behind you, then go straight to these pallets and loop the hunter around them if possible. Let's talk about the hospital cipher. Although the second floor cipher is much safer, this cipher is still good. You can give this cipher to your weaker teammates too, in case the hunter chases them first. So when you decode this cipher, the hunter could either come from that way, or this pallet here as well. If the hunter comes from this side, you can take the window and head to the second window, and you can loop the hunter. But if the hunter comes from that side, you go through this pallet. Don't use this pallet yet. You should really save this pallet so you can loop the area more. If you use this pallet immediately, this area becomes a little weaker for you to loop around. Anyway, when you go through the hospital pallet, go to this kiting spot and try to tight kite here, unless the hunter is a bonbon or naiads. Usually, there is a cipher here on this floor, and when you do get this, spawn as a rescuer or someone with strong kiting ability. Please, leave this cipher, don't hog this to yourself, and please just give this cipher to your decoder and weak teammates like Seer, Postman, Embalmer, and other characters that have to do raw kiting, or a non-rescuer that is running Tide Turner. Unless it's a priestess, because she has her portals, so ideally, someone weaker like Professor or Painter. Anyway, when you get a heartbeat, you can just wait at this pallet to see where the hunter comes from, and most of the time, you end up dropping this pallet, just so the hunter can't hit you without recovery when you drop down. And you can just loop this whole building. So first off, this cipher. Now, this cipher isn't really bad. But the thing here is that these windows are only good for speed boosts. If the hunter goes through the doorway, do not use these windows to kite. But if you insist on decoding this cipher, okay, let me show you what you can do. When you get a heartbeat, get off this cipher quickly and get behind this building. Alright, so you stay right here and wait to see where the hunter could possibly come from. Now, if the hunter comes from this side, you can take the stairs. If the hunter comes from the side of the stairs, you can just go towards this pallet and loop the hunter around this obstacle. But if the hunter comes from this side, you can clearly see the hunter if they come from here, so just head to the stairs. And if the hunter teleports to your cipher, you can just go straight to this pallet. But when you loop around this pallet, make sure you are on this side of the pallet when you use the pallet, and the hunter breaks it so that you can head inside to story. Because when you're on this side of the pallet, your only way is to go towards these windows, but this area is just a bad spot to be in. Alright, this cipher in 2-story is the best cipher on this map because you are inside the safest kiting spot. I know you don't have vision of where the hunter could come from, but what you need to do is just head upstairs when you get a heartbeat. And you have 2 options. This pallet right here, or this drop. I suggest you conserve this pallet unless you really need to use it. When you fall down here, head towards the pallet and again, you can loop the hunter around it. This cipher is kinda bad. You have 2 options, that window or the center. You have this pallet right here, but this pallet is just awful. If you drop this pallet, the hunter can easily go around it. If you're lucky, you can get a pallet stun, but that's unlikely. And this pallet right here is just a trap. No matter which side you drop this pallet, you are going to be trapped between the pallet and the hunter. You shouldn't bother using this pallet. You are either going to get hit or terror shocked if you decide to vault this pallet. Alright, so you're decoding this cipher right here. Usually, the hunter comes from this direction. But if they come from the side of this window, you can go towards this pallet. Alright, if the hunter comes from this direction, you can clearly see them if they're heading towards this cipher, so if they are, then get off your cipher and head to the window. It's even better if you have knee-jerk reflex to get to 2-story. But you can still take this route without a speed boost as long as you get off your cipher early. So let me guess, you decoded this cipher and you died in 5 seconds, is that right? Just joking, but anyway, decoding this cipher machine early game is basically asking for a death wish. Many hunters will go to this spot because they know this is a weak kiting area. You only have this pallet, and this isn't really the best for looping, but you can still try. You may still end up getting hit when you try transitioning away from this area. If you go for the pallet there, you will most definitely get hit. And this pallet right here is terrible. The hunter can easily go around it. But you also have this area. And this area, well, it's decent. You can try looping the hunter around here. Like, if the hunter was a Wu-Chan. Okay, just loop this area. Loop, loop. Keep looping. And eventually, you end up using this pallet. When you drop this pallet, you'd want to be on this side of the pallet. You should absolutely make the hunter break it on the other side. When they do, you can head over to here. If you have a speed boost, you can use this window to get to the center. Your other option is to get to these pallets, but honestly, you should save these pallets for endgame. So my advice? Do not decode the cipher. This cipher, too. Do not decode this cipher either, because this cipher is a dangerous cipher. Why? Well, you only have this kiting area right here, and the other area beside it. Just plain horrible. This is 5-second kite territory, people. When you get a heartbeat, you can go here. Again, wait to see where the hunter will come from. Okay, so you are decoding here. No matter which side the hunter is, you loop this spot. This is not going to work against a bloody queen, a naiads, a breaking wheel, or a disciple. And that is an even bigger reason why you should not be here. But when you need to use this pallet, the ideal situation is that you are on this side of the pallet. You absolutely have to be on this side of the pallet. Why? Well, because when you are standing on this spot right here, and the hunter breaks this pallet on the opposite side, you can transition to here. This is good if you have knee-jerk reflex. So you can get to these two pallets right here. And you can loop the hunter here if it's possible. But still, I really don't recommend you take that cipher early game. Okay, so this cipher is, I wouldn't say it's good, because the kiting areas are a little far away. If a geisha dashes to you, you might get hit before you can get to a pallet. Anyway, if the hunter comes from middle, you can go up these stairs, and you can wait for the hunter on the bridge. But if the hunter comes from that side, don't run to these pallets. You are going to run into the hunter that way. Unless you have a good item for transitioning, you are going to get hit first before you can get anywhere. You can head here, but actually no. The kiting area here is just bad. So you don't want to go here. Now, you can also go for this window. But you are going to get hit before you can get to it. So don't take this cipher unless you are playing a strong character or a rescue character. Here, it's much better than the cipher outside this area. The only thing you need to do is go upstairs when you get a heartbeat. And when you go upstairs, wait at the bridge. But do not drop down until after the hunter has gone upstairs, or else they can just easily catch up to you. Force them to go to the bridge. Okay, so when the hunter is finally near the doorway, go down. Remember, the hunter falls slower than a survivor. You can loop these pallets right here. Or you can head to middle where you can loop the tree. You may think this is not the best, but you can actually loop this tree like the carousels in Moonlit. So usually, there is a cipher machine here, and the cipher here is not the best cipher to decode if you're running a 36 or 312 build, guys, unless you're really good at looping the hunter or have good items or skills. Now, if you have a 39 build, you can drop this pallet here. So if the hunter comes from middle, you can use the pallet for a speed boost to get to the smaller 2-story building. But if the hunter is coming from the building, you can head to this window for a speed boost as well to get to these 2 pallets. You can kite here, but of course, you should be careful if a teammate is decoding here. Now, this cipher. First of all, you do not want to decode here at all. Many hunters will also go to the spawn point when there's a cipher, because this is also a weak area. You have these 2 pallets, but the hunter can easily get a hit on you if they used a charged attack, or if they're a black Wu Chang with a bell. This one is a little too far away. If the hunter is a bloody queen or a disciple, you are going to get hit. But what you can do here is you drop this pallet. So if the hunter is coming from middle, you can use this pallet for a speed boost. You can loop around here, but you can also use this window for another speed boost. And then you can get to this pallet where you can loop the hunter, unless they have anti-looping skills. This cipher is not too bad, but a decoder should not be decoding here, unless you want to get chased. The best survivor to decode this cipher is a rescuer or a survivor with good transitional kiting abilities. You at least have these pallets here. But you can also use this pallet here for a quick speed boost if the hunter comes to your cipher. So if the hunter comes from that direction, use your pallet speed boost to quickly get to 2-story. As for this cipher, well, this cipher is kind of in an awkward position. You have this big tree. But looping this big tree depends on who the hunter is. You have 3 options, and 2 of them may not apply to people with 36 or 312 builds. The first one is you drop this pallet, and you can use it for a speed boost to get to 2-story. Again, you can loop this tree or vault the window over there. If the hunter comes from that direction, you vault this pallet and head straight to 2-story. I swear, you have time. Except, of course, if the hunter is someone like Percy or Breaking Wheel. If the hunter comes from that side, then you can vault this window. But depending on the hunter, you may not have time. Okay. You vault this window and head to these 2 pallets right here, and you can loop. Do know that these kiting routes are not always going to work. Which route you take depends on the hunter. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I have some guides on how to kite certain hunters. But if you have been subscribed for a while now, thank you so much for supporting me. I will be making a part 2 for this video, and I hope you'd still continue the support. I have a lot of fun making these content for you all. Anyway, that is all I have for this video. Thanks for watching.